Hi there, I'm Anthony Dellaporto and I'm an instructor and coach in delivering change through managing projects, which then lead up to programs underneath a portfolio or business area. Now, what I want to do in this session is, as you probably saw by the title, it's about PRINCE2. Now, this is not a training session. This is purely advisory and information video about projects and PRINCE2 and how we use PRINCE2 in a high-level view right through the whole life cycle of a PRINCE2 project. Now, what aspects you use of that obviously depends again on the tailoring you need for the project. But what we're intending to do here is just to give you an overview. So there's not going to be a lot of detail. The detail is contained in other videos that have specific areas, like the business case or the organization, or a specific process like controlling a stage and managing the product delivery. This is to give you a once through as a high level view of the step-by-step process we take. Because really, at the end of the day, that's what the life cycle is helping us do. It's giving a guidance and a framework to help us step through so we don't get ahead of ourselves. We're not trying to run before we can even crawl and mind walk. So it's allowing you to do that for many reasons. Main reasons being to understand a lot more about the project as we go through from a build point of view, but primarily it's about governance. It's about allowing the people who own the project, in this case the project executive or at corporate level, to make decisions about going forward from here onwards. The three key words in PRINCE are desirable, viable and achievable. Do we still want it? Desirable? Viable? Can we still build it? And of course, finally, achievable, will it still deliver what we expect it to do? And of course, what we expect it to do is deliver beneficial change. It's about the benefit. Right? So that's what we're going to look at, how we govern that through. So the first thing that we have in a project, of course, is what kicks it off from a PRINCE2 point of view is the project mandate. Right? Now, this is a form of a document, whatever it happens to be, that will come down from the corporate or program body. Corporate, right, stroke program. Now, because you may well be a project, part of a program, and therefore the trigger for your project in that particular tranche in a program is what will trigger that off. Okay, so this is the first thing that happens. We get a trigger from our friends at corporate level with the mandate, which then triggers off the first process within a PRINCE2, which is starting up a project. So let's put that up here. Starting up a project process. And the real point here of a project is to get some definition, some understanding of what the project is actually about and put some formality about it, because the mandate might be on a single sheet of paper, it might be quite a complex document. What we need to do now is unravel all that, put a high level view of the project's about so the business can understand that and the people who are going to build it for us, the suppliers, so we can all understand that and agree what it's about at high level. All right. Now, in this particular case, usually the first role that's on board is going to be the project executive. The project executive will be on board, usually will be appointed by a corporate. Now, if it's coming out of the project executive's particular department, it's their budget, they may well have appointed themselves, said to the corporate, look, this is what we're going to do, we're going to kick this off right now, and therefore they've already appointed themselves to a certain extent. But the project will actually need the project executive straight away. And the sort of role description will be probably either something they've got or come from corporate or maybe from the PMO about what they actually need to incorporate themselves. And to help the project executive, of course, we need the role of a project manager, a role of someone who's going to be doing most of the work, right? Because really at the end of the day, the PM is there to coordinate the environment for the delivery, not do the builds. Shouldn't be really, sometimes they do, but to control the environment for the executive. Now, it's still not totally formal yet. The project's still in starting up mode, but we're trying to formalize most of the information. So usually the first thing the PM will need to do is just to put some form of document together to record things in a daily log, right? And it's usually a very good idea I mean, to put this in here, if you've got lessons learned from other projects, is to have a lessons log, right? And that will be trapping, capturing issues and any other lessons from previous projects, programs, from their experience or other people's experience about the project that we're running here, right? Now, the next useful thing to look at is to understand what the project's about. So what we now need to look at is what the project is delivering. So the project product description, right? Description. What are we delivering here? That's usually a good idea. This is the high end of the scope. What is this whole project about? A new application document. And linked to that will be two important pieces of information. One will be the quality expectations of the overall solution, expectations, and linked to that will be the acceptance criteria for that acceptance criteria. Right? Very important. So we know what the solution is going to be from a quality point of view and how we're going to accept that. Now, from a business perspective, they need to know really what this whole project's about, because at the end of the day, this is going to be their governance documents. So we need the business case, right? And at this point, it's just an outline, right? And not going to do all the details here, but the key elements of the business case are why are we doing this, the reasons, and what we expect to get out of it, right? I'm going to put major risks in here because they'll have a link. So we also need to make sure we've understood what the major risks are, right? Showstoppers, major risks, because they will eventually also be trapped in the lessons log initially, or the daily log, one of them anyway, so that you will transfer that later into the risk register when you formally kick the project off in the next stage, which is initiating the project. Well, almost the next stage and process, because before that we have to go to directing, which you'll see in a minute. So the business case. At this point too, it's usually a good idea to get some idea of what the organizational structure might be, organization, right? What sort of team do I need to have? And therefore linked to that, their roles and responsibilities. Roles and responsibilities linked to that particular part of it. So, what sort of team do I need for what sort of project am I going to be building? Do I need software developers? Do I need, hardware specialists? Do I need architects, designers, builders, graphic designers, whatever it happens to be, whatever the project's about? What sort of team do I need to have? Because what we're trying to do here, of course, is understand whether this project's going to be worthwhile and viable. Is it worthwhile spending the money on it? And viability. That's why we're doing this in this particular phase, get a high-level view. Is it worthwhile for the business to run the project? And look at, can it be built? Right? Is it viable? The other thing we need to understand is the project approach. Now, curiously enough, Prince calls it the program. This is how to develop the solution, how to deliver the solution, right? The objective, the project product. Because really, this is the development approach rather than the project. Anyway, Prince calls it the project approach, right? Now, all this is collectively put together, right? Especially the role descriptions here in the project brief. So this goes into a project brief. Because before we can proceed to the next process, the next part of the project, we need to have sign-off. This is the governance in place. That's why we're doing this in short form. This is governance. But also what we need to do is let them know, because this is usually quite short, a short time frame, a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks. But the next one, the initiating, is going to be bigger, because now we've got to plan the project in a lot more detail, right? So we do the project brief. Because we're going to be doing a lot more work, we need to produce the initiation stage plan, right? The ISP, the stage plan for initiating a project. And all this will go up to the next process in place. I'll put a border around this so we know this is a particular process. right? And that this now kicks off the next process, which now runs throughout the rest of the project. And this is the directing a project process. So let's put that in. Let's call it directing a project. And this is key because this is where the direction and the decision making comes from. This is where the board will sit. In the PRINCE2 thing, we have the board with the project executive, senior supplier and senior user sat there who will then give direction and decision to the project from here onwards. But it only gets triggered at the end of starting up a project when we hand over the project brief and there's the initiation stage plan. So this is how we see the thing. Let's go on. Now, of course, the project executive is already on board here. But at this point, we may even have the senior supplier on board at this point, because at this same time, they need to sort of give an understanding whether that's going to work or not and have some input into that. Go to directing a project, and what we're going to do here is to request, initiate a project. We need that information here because we need their authority to go to that process. It's called a stage, actually, in this case. We see it's the first stage of a PRINCE2 project. Right. Quite a bit of work. And the point about initiating a project is now to establish how we're going to deliver the solution from here onwards. I've got more detail about how we're going to manage the project as well. So it's about breaking down the products, getting more information into the business case, and understanding how we're going to look at the project from there onwards. Right, so now we've completed starting up a project process. We've gone to directing a project process to talk to the board to now get their approval to proceed. So we've made the request to initiate a project, to initiate a project from here onwards. That will be based on the project brief, which we reduce from a high-level view of the project at this point and the initiation stage plan, because now we've got a bit of work to do, which is what we're going to talk about next. Now, from a point of view of directing a project, their main activities are here for direction, decision, to approve things all the time, and ad hoc advice. Right, and we'll see that throughout the rest of this sequence as we go through. So I'm not going to look at that directly right now, completely directly. What I'm going to look at now is initiating a project process. So once we've gone through there, we now move into initiating a project. Now, as this has got quite a lot of work involved in it, Prince sees this as stage one. So we're going to write in here stage one. Right, stage one. And we're going to go through a load of work. I'm just going to do it in high level to show exactly what's going on in here. And then we'll look at what triggers from there onwards and into the project itself. But once again, we'll go back to the board and ask for their approval. Okay. So there'll be usually communications going on between them. But as we go through this, obviously the members of the board should be involved throughout this part of the project as well. This is quite important, actually. People seem to think they sit back and don't do anything. Well, they're part of it. You know, when we talk about planning, part of the decision points come from the board to know about when to plan things. Okay, when we need to make decisions. This is what stages are about. So we'll look at that. Now, Prince's view is this is about solid foundations. Solid foundations. From startup, it's about viable and worthwhile. Right? Wow. So we're going to look at that solid initiating your project. So the first thing we need to put together here are some strategies. So let's have a look at strategies. How are we going to go about addressing certain areas? And those main areas are around risk. We need to know how we're going to manage risk, quality, right? Quality, whoops, I've got the T there. We need to look at configuration change and configuration. You know, how we handle issues. Remember, issues and risks, keep them separate, right? And also communications. Now, usually the communication strategy is the last one that's put together because it links with all the rest, because here we've got roles and responsibilities within risk, quality and configuration, who's responsible, and also therefore we need to know how to communicate them. Now the next major thing we need to do here, of course, is understand the product itself. So here we employ a technique called product-based planning. And this is not so much a PRINCE2, but it's a technique that PRINCE2 recommends to use. And that's something I usually make a big point of, because it helps us to understand what the product's about, what the linkages are within a project, helps us to understand a lot more about the scope. And therefore, we can also look at something else called prioritization, right? Now, there's something to use here as well. Prioritize your products in the sense of, what do I actually have to deliver for this solution to work as I see it at this point? But it also gives you an understanding about what's dependent, what's internal dependency, and what are external dependencies. And we look at that through another video on scope, etc., and product-based planning too. So I need to do the product-based planning, because what I actually need to do now is understand how I'm going to put the plan together. So I need to put the project plan. Right? I now need to build a project plan. I can't do that until I've understood where the products are and how the linkages are and what groups I need to do and when I need to build them. So I can't do that until I've done the product-based planning. Right? And that'll lead me to project controls. Project controls, how I'm going to manage the project, right? From that point of view, from tolerances, for example, escalations, handling those sort of things. So these are the two areas. But managed by exception, which really is empowerment. It's the same thing, really. Project plan, project controls. Now I can also get a lot more information about the organization. So now I can actually firm up my team. So the organization and the team is confirmed. The organization and the team is put together. Okay, at this point. So we've got all these things. We can now get a much more detailed business case, because at the end of the day, the business is going to have to make a decision on that. So now we take the business case and get a detailed business case, all right? And as we produce the project control, the project plan and product-based planning, we now have a better understand on how we're going to deliver the solution, what Prince calls the project approach. Right. So one interesting thing to note here, during starting up, we're making some definitions about different areas, like business options we may have in place, the approach on how we're going to deliver the solution. I'm going to do it in-house, is it off the shelf? I'm going to get some bespoke stuff done. Right. And that's what you're ending up going to work out. What's the project approach I'm going to deliver all this? Okay. Now, another thing we need to look at, of course, is we're delivering stuff, we need to understand what the benefits are going to be. So linked to this will be the start of the benefits review plan. Right, linked to the business case, because obviously the business case is going to have what the benefits are about. Okay. At this point, we're now at a point where we start to put all this together. And most of these documents up here will be contained in something called the project initiation documentation. Now, be very careful. This is a bunch of documents. That's why it's called documentation. The PID, be careful. It's not an animal in its own right. It is a collection of documents, like the old briefcase used to be, on the top of it on your desktop in Office 98, if you go that far back. Right? And so it's a collection of documents. How they're formed, how much of each of those documents you need is dependent on what you're actually putting together. We have the risk register connected to that, the quality register, you'll have your issues register from your configuration, etc. So all those are all documents you're going to have here. How much you need depends on what the project needs. Don't put them there just because you need to, or you think you have to, sorry. Don't put them there because you need to. Okay? Benefits review plan. Right? But that is not in the PID, because that's about project stuff. And of course, the benefits review plan carries on after the project's closed. That's not included in the PID. This group of documents are. And finally, underneath that, we need to put a plan the next stage. In this case, the first delivery stage, the next stage. And from our point of view, in this, it's going to be stage 2, right? We've got stage 1 here, so it's going to be stage 2. So we have a separate document for the BRP, a separate document for the next stage plan, because the business need to see that, and also the document. So they all need to agree. That's how we're going to run it from here on. Decide here, define over here, decide here what we're going to do, right? And put some pen and paper and get it down and get it signed off. Baseline it at this point, baseline your document, say this is an agreed state at this point in time. Right? I stress that because it's very important, because the very next day things may well have changed. So now we've got the benefits review plan, we've got our PID, the initiation documentation for all the plan, the strategies, the products based down, so we understand a lot more about the products themselves in more detail. And what we now need to do is plan the next stage. Now to do that, what that means is we've completed that stage. We're now at a stage boundary, right? So this is our first stage boundary. Remember, initiating a project process is also a stage. So now we have a stage boundary, and that is to mark the end of that particular process or that particular stage, in this case the first one. And what we're going to do here now is wrap everything up, make sure everything's correct, we've got all the documentation in place to close the stage down, and therefore go to the board with information to ask them to give authority to go to the next stage. But also what we need to do here, in this particular case, we're coming out of IP, initiating a project, is we do the planning in here. So we now do that planning, because that's the last thing we really need to do in that stage, is plan it. And then from there, we will go to the board with our documents, in this case, which is the BRP, the benefits review plan, the plan the next stage, and the project initiation documentation. Initiation documentation. The PID. The PID, right? PID. Please remember, it's not a document, it's a collection of documents. And therefore we take those to the board, all those 3, and therefore we request to deliver a project, because we need to go to ask them for authority to go to the next, at which point they will then authorize to deliver the project. They have to authorize their project. They've got to decide is, have we got enough information in the documents? Are we comfortable with the way we're looking to run the project, to our strategies, the business case, the approach we're going to take, the benefits expected, and the plan we're going to do. So look at what we've got so far and what we're going to do next. They need to make that authority and sign it off, and that's what they're going to do here. And that's their main role throughout, and therefore keep corporate program in touch with what's happening as well. So we'll look at that a bit later on. Go to them, request, and off we go. Hopefully get the green light, and then we'll go into delivering the project in earnest. And that's when we really kick the project off, and we're going to have a look at that in the next part of this session.